Okay, can't see my big deal. Not a big deal. Did you click a button? Okay, so welcome everyone to the International Water Resources Association webinar on water reuse and the circular economy. Our panelists today include Leslie Rotrich from the University of Waterloo, Alicia Stefan from Fractia Inhartia Simansa, Cecilia Tortiga, the National University of Singapore and with the IWRA, and Mary Trudeau with Environs Incorporated and IWRA. Now, as you know, this is a webinar hosted by the International Water Resources Association. The IWRA is an international network of researchers and practitioners who work on a multidisciplinary range of water resource issues. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization. The IWRA provides a global knowledge-based forum for bridging disciplines and geographies by connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions who are all concerned with sustainable use of the world's water resources. We're really happy to have you all here today, and thank you for tuning in. We have a really great panel here today with practitioners and researchers who really span the gamut of experience and who can bring a lot of different perspectives to us. And I think that's what's going to be really great here today. So today, as you know, our panel, that's why we're tuning in, is going to talk about water reuse and circular economy. And you know, today we think about how techniques and approaches to better manage water resources are needed to really address the changes of climate change, population growth, and changing economic productions. Water reuse will become essential because naturally our water supply is quite limited. Like other water natural resources, water must be used within the economy that values its repeated use to get the full advantages of the resource while minimizing the need for new extractions. I think as we've seen, that's happening all around the world, with different aquifers running dry and a limited number of resources coming. So we have to come and turn to how to reuse. So there's a lot of challenges to fully implement water reuse in the communities and industry and agriculture, but we know that successful case studies have demonstrated that these challenges can be overcome. So I just want to briefly explain the format of today's webinar, which will be a little different than we're used to. Each of our panelists will have a short presentation. At the end, we'll have time for audience questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it up. It should be on the GoToWebinar control panel about halfway down. You type a question and send it in. And then feel free to send your questions in as soon as they come to your mind. We will be able to get to them after all the presentations. And if in the event that we don't get all the questions, I'll try to get them posed to our panel after the event, and we can post them on our website at www.iwra.com, along with the recording and the PDFs of these presentations. So we appreciate everyone tuning in, and with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Mary Trudeau.
Thank you very much, Scott, and I will. Do I have control of the screen? No, I don't. Just while that's setting up, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. So hopefully now, there we go. So I'm kicking off the talk today with really, the objective of my presentation is to provide some context and an overview of the key concepts. You know, water security, water reuse, circular economy, these are really broad subject areas, and we could spend all day, let alone an hour and a half on any one of them. But this webinar has the same theme as an upcoming UNESCO publication, and that's how we managed to whittle down and decide, you know, what to present to you today as part of this webinar. So for my talk, the few minutes I have, I'll just talk about the concept definitions, and I use that term definitions very, very loosely. We haven't tried to really nail down, you know, what exactly does water reuse mean or circular economy, because they have to be applied in the context in which they exist. And water, as we know, although there's global issues, it has to be applied at a local and regional scale. So some of the definitions, and also I'm going to just identify some things to keep in mind and encourage you to ask questions as the presentations go on, so that we have almost half an hour for discussion at the end. So there's a global water security issues series that IWRA, in association with UNESCO's International Center for Water Security and Sustainable Management, the i-WSSM, are collaborating to produce the second publication in the series with the theme Water Reuse in a Circular Economy Context. And each of today's presenters have a chapter in the publication. Publication's currently under development. It's being produced for distribution. It's not quite ready yet. There was an earlier issue, the 2018 series. The theme was water security and the Sustainable Development Goals, and you can get a copy of that at the UN's digital library site. So this initiative, the Global Water Security Issues series, is one initiative to translate science into action for a sustainable future. And the UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program has identified water security as a key challenge for this century. And that program builds scientific knowledge for water resource management and governance. It facilitates education and capacity building. It also engages in research on hydrological and socio-economic topics, and develops tools to adapt to a changing water availability. So it fits very well with the IWRA objective, one of which is to link science to policy for capacity building. So we've collaborated on this initiative. So why water reuse? Water reuse specifically with respect to water security. So water reuse isn't new. We all know that water cycles continuously on our planet. Some of it may be tied up for, a few hundred years or centuries in an iceberg or in an aquifer, but ultimately it all recycles, and we know that we're probably drinking water that a dinosaur at one time consumed. So the concept of water reuse isn't new, but we haven't taken it on board in terms of the way we operate our economy. We understand it intellectually, but we haven't actually put it into practice in the way that we manage water resources. And water reuse, we use different terms. It can be reclaimed water, recycled wastewater. We refer to it in different ways, but it all falls within this sort of umbrella of reuse. And it is a key strategy for water security because we have increasing water demands. We have, increasing population. We've got food supplies that we have to require water. And also the economy, economic activities are increasing water demand as well. Layered on top of that, we have the very serious issue of changing climate that's forcing water cycle changes, where water falls, the intensity, the rate of evaporation, all of, temperature is intrinsically tied to the water cycle. And so we have these challenges that make water reuse more and more important. And it's also essential to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. All of the goals are interrelated, but specifically Goal 6, the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation. Goal 11, to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. That can only be done with water being used that is reliable and safe. But also SDG 12, which is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns, which also requires reuse not only of water, but of all of the resources that we use within the economy. So water reuse within a circular economy, the concept is to go from this practice of product, use it, dispose of it, and in the production, we have waste streams. So this linear idea of resources in, wastes out, and then a product that ultimately gets disposed. The circular economy is to use resources in a way that allows for their reuse and actually anticipates the reuse of those resources. So It's circular in that there are resource loops, and it recognizes the interconnectedness of all resources. So water, nutrients, phosphorus, for example, energy, heat, these are all interconnected, and we need to have a more holistic approach to really encapsulate and implement this approach of a circular economy. And there's an intrinsic connection of resources with environment. They don't come out of nowhere and go back to nowhere. They come from the planet, and we really have to understand and really seriously incorporate that into how we use resources. So the transition from linear to circular economy, it's possible, as you will see from the discussions, the presentations that are following this one, but there are challenges. And maybe some of the first challenges we might think of are the technological and scientific. So how do we treat water, for example, remove constituents that may have been added by an industrial process, and then have that water suitable for another use. So we have to match the quality to the use, and we have to keep in mind that it's going to be used and reused. There are policy planning and governance challenges in terms of how we approach issues, how we plan, our planning horizon, and the supply side mentality that has been used for water up until, very recently, and in some places still is, where this idea, if we're running short of water, we'll just find another source. We'll, desalinate, or we'll find another lake or another river. We want to move away from supply side mentality to recognizing the water that we have is a resource that can be used. So we have capacities, also challenges, human capacities, for example, to implement new, more advanced technologies in some cases, but also institutional capacities, adapting into institutions so that they have the processes and the budgets and the institutional capacity to take a new approach. And then the cultural, as you'll hear in some of the presentations also, stakeholder engagement and embracing change are part of addressing this challenge for water reuse. So with climate change, water issues are global, but the solutions have to be local and regional to suit the watershed and the aquifers that each community and industrial process or agricultural activity needs. So some things to keep in mind, I've talked about the challenges, but there are also opportunities from water reuse. For example, recovery of other resources. One of the ones that comes to my mind is phosphorus or other nutrients that we use in various processes and use as part of agricultural activities, being able to recover those and also introduce the reuse approach there. Capacity development offers enormous opportunities at individual right through to community and national scales, and the opportunity for strategic planning to really approach resource use and the economic model that we have from a much more strategic and holistic perspective. So there are knowledge transfer and citizen engagement. And also the scales of action. If you have specific interests or topics that you're coming to this webinar, what are the scales of action that you see? Local, regional, global, watershed, aquifer. These are, some of the questions or some of the maybe topics for discussion after we have our presentations. So thank you. When the Global Water Security Issues publication is available with the theme on water reuse in a circular economy, it will be promoted through the networks, the IWRA and the UNESCO network. So when that's available, you should see some communications on that. So thank you. So now I'm going to ask Scott maybe to hand it over to Cecilia, who will do our next presentation on the success in Singapore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for the invitation to speak today, Scott. I will be speaking on Singapore, and this is on behalf of my co-author and I on contribution we made to this book that Mary mentioned on the circular economy. And I would like to introduce all of you to Singapore, this place that changes physically, and you can see it in the images at the top, and it changes socially, economically, culturally. It's a very dynamic place. And for all its industrial growth and for the population growth, it has needed to produce water because this water was not available. And this is where comes the importance of the water reuse in the circular economy. So this is Singapore, where water resources have been diversified with the goal to achieve security. They are the local catchment, which is rainfall, imported water from Johor, Malaysia, new water, that is the local name that is given to reuse water, and desalinated water, plus demand management strategy. Now, new water was conceptualized in early 1970s, and budget was put aside for research with the objective to increase the amount of fresh water available for long-term socioeconomic development of Singapore. Singapore is one of the very few places in the world that plans in the long term and plans in order to implement. Plans are developed to be used. Now, new water was also conceptualized with a circular economy in mind. This is the production of new water has always had the objective to increase the amount of clean, fresh water for all uses, present and future, by recovering and by reusing as much as possible of the water resources available. Now, this is the water cycle in Singapore. And this keeps, believe me, in mind development opportunities at every step. New water is indicated in purple lines. It has two main uses. It is mostly for direct non-potable use through the new water transmission network. And it is also for indirect potable use, where a small percentage of new water is blended with water in the reservoir. Now, the direct non-potable use is for water-intensive industries. Examples include wafer fabrication plants, petrochemical industries, commercial and public building for air conditioning, cooling towers, and so on. Among the wafer fabrication plants that are in Singapore are the world's top 3 hard disk drive manufacturing. So it is important to provide them with the water they need in order to continue operating in Singapore. Now, new water, as part of the circular economy, is part of a larger vision, and this is one of water conservation. For a circular economy, conservation of all water resources is important. In the case of Singapore, non-domestic water use, as you can see here, is expected to double from 2019 to 2060, from approximately 230 million gallons per day at present to about 919. And the cost and energy requirements of producing new water will be higher. Well, they are higher in comparison to conventional treatment methods, but their cost is going to increase as time passes, even when technology improves. So therefore, it is important that the non-domestic sector, which is the one that uses and will uses in the future the most amount of water, that becomes more efficient. Out of these figures that I am presenting here, new water is being planned that new water will produce about 55% of all the water that will be needed by 2060. So many challenges, all the challenges you can imagine, from technological, management, cultural. But PUB, which is a national water agency, they have engaged with the different industries. And so what is there to do? Many things. One of them is to develop efficiency measures, that you engage with industries, but then you make them mandatory. And then the industries have responded very well. And there are companies or industries that are using less potable water because this is what is required, and because they have become more efficient. Companies that have replaced potable water with new water, and also those that are using less new water and or replacing it with desalinated water. There are companies that report that their water consumption has reduced about by up to 80%. Other companies that are constructing their own recycling plants. And overall, the objective is that by the time Singapore comes to 2060, it will be self-sufficient. And as I mentioned before, 55% of this water will come from new water, planning to supply to a much more efficient industrial sector. Part of efficiency is pricing. And as you will see, new water is slightly more expensive per cubic meter than potable water. If use of potable water is up to 40 cubic meters, when it is more, then the price increases. And the reason is because if new water is treated, then the company's new water is treated to higher quality, so companies will not have to treat it. Therefore, they can pay for this a small amount for a process they will not have to follow. And let me close by showing you Singapore. Very much urbanized and very much industrialized, but very much at the forefront of all the technological and managerial and cultural change. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, Cecilia. So our next presenter is Leslie, and as she sets up, what I'd like to point out from Cecilia's presentation is that it can be done. You know, the challenges that I mentioned, I think it's, the situation that Cecilia has described in Singapore is inspirational because it, you know, it takes a whole holistic approach with a suite of measures, including technology and cultural and also governance issues. So thank you very much, Cecilia. We'll have some questions on that. So I'll turn it over to Leslie.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. And I'll be talking about the potential of wastewater reuse in Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya. So Nairobi, like many other cities in Africa, has experienced rapid population growth, and the current water management systems have been unable to keep up with the growing demand. New sources of water are either becoming fewer in number, economically expensive, or politically controversial, and this has fueled the need for improved use and management of existing sources of water. Additionally, there is inadequate infrastructure and services in the region's water and sanitation sector, as you can see with the two pie charts there. And there's a significant portion of the population that relies on informal vendors for household water, and also disposes of their liquid and solid waste in ditches, streams, and open dump sites. So out of all this, wastewater presents a potentially viable option as a new source of water for Nairobi because of its reliability, its availability, and its raw water quality. So we set out to carry out a small study. We were specifically looking at localized, decentralized wastewater reuse systems, as you can see from the two pictures. And just because of the size of the study, we did not aim for this study to be very definitive, but rather we just wanted to explore whether this rollout of these systems can be practical for Nairobi and whether they can be meaningful contributors to achieving sustainable development goal number 6. So we specifically looked at 3 aspects of this. The first is the drivers for and the benefits from recycling water. The second is the barriers against the uptake of wastewater reuse. And the third thing that we looked at is the feasibility of these wastewater reuse systems. So we conducted a total of 27 interviews, which consisted of various government officials from different water-related departments, technical experts who are in the water recycling business, and clients who use formal, which are the commercial systems that treat wastewater before reuse, and residents of Katwekera village in Kibera who use the informal systems, which can also be called the bucket method that you can see in the lower picture on the left side. So we chose two economically different areas for analysis. We chose Kibera because it experiences the greatest challenges in obtaining potable water and sanitation services. And we also chose different sections of middle to high income areas of Nairobi, as is reflected in the commercial reach of private companies that sell and install grey and wastewater reuse systems. So next, I'll discuss the drivers and the barriers and the feasibility in that order. And in terms of drivers, the first driver that we were able to find was a lack of adequate sewerage infrastructure. And this has forced house owners to invest in various water sanitation solutions like septic tanks, bioregisters, and these recycling systems that we're talking about. All the formal users that we were able to interview use these systems as their main wastewater discharge systems, as they were not connected to the sewer, and established the need for them to mix both their grey and black water. The second driver that we found was legislation, and the current water quality discharge regulations has fueled the growth of the wastewater recycling sector in Kenya. And technical experts attested to these regulations being a very positive influence on their businesses, as environmental impact assessment approvals required developers to show their effluent discharge plans, and this enabled these technical experts to be able to tap into that market. And then the third driver we found was practical benefits. And an overwhelming majority of the participants agree that reusing their grey and wastewater reduces the use of and the cost of obtaining fresh water. For the formal users that we got to interviews, recycling wastewater also reduces the cost that they would have incurred for sewerage services, like getting a septic hauler truck. And besides these benefits, we also found that recycling wastewater has positive ecological impact, as it reduces the amount of untreated wastewater that would otherwise have been discharged into the environment. If you can remember, only 48%, if you can remember from the pie chart, only 48% of the region is connected to the main sewer line, which leaves about 52% to have to figure out where they can dispose of their liquid and solid waste. And then the last driver that we found is also an appreciation for modern technology that some people have, and this can be linked to education and exposure. And as technical experts were able to explain, educated people are more willing to and have the capacity to invest in these systems, and are also concerned about the environment and have like the green altruism to the environment. Next, I'll go through the barriers that we found, and the biggest barrier was cost, and that is the cost of acquisition of the systems and also the cost of maintenance. And in the first year of the systems purchase, the cost, we found the cost to be around $6,000 US, which greatly limits those who can be able to afford these systems. Additionally, most of the parts of the system are imported, which also marks up the prices substantially. And there are also maintenance costs for the systems, for energy, for servicing, and for chemicals, which further increases monetary burdens to the user. The next barrier that we found was a lack of government support, and a lot of participants just attested to a lack of government support, especially for technical experts who are in the industry, who cited that the government really does nothing to support business. This can also be seen in the lack of proper guidelines towards domestic reuse of both grey and wastewater, and also just a disconnect between government entities and those who are in the wastewater recycling industry. The next barrier that we found was a public perception, and this can be explained in two ways. One is the attitude towards water, and a lot of people have a dismissive attitude towards water reuse, especially when it comes to reusing domestic water for conservation purposes, because they feel like the amount of water that they use domestically is far less than that required for industry or for agricultural purposes. And so some people don't really feel the need to have to reuse their domestic water. And a different way that we can look also at the public perception is the yuck factor that is usually associated with recycled water. And while most of the system users that we interviewed voiced no concerns over the quality of their recycled water, we found that participants attested to a general negative perception that surrounds wastewater recycling, which fuels health concerns over the safety of this water. This negative perception can be linked to a lack of adequate knowledge on proper wastewater recycling methods and subsequent reuse of the recycled water. Participants were also able to offer various ways to overcome these barriers. And one of them is through tax rebates and subsidies. And also another effective strategy would be the establishment of financial agreements between lending institutions and government, just to be able to provide credit facilities for those who would want to purchase the system. So this would help new homeowners to be able to get loans that would cover the cost of the installation of the systems, and also those who want to retrofit their houses and install wastewater recycling systems would also be able to benefit from this strategy. And then also just a general and more complete understanding of grey and wastewater reuse systems is needed for all stakeholders to be able to make better informed decisions, and also just to create a knowledgeable platform upon which the very young industry can be able to develop. Technical experts were able to mention that education and exposure levels are aspects that affect the acceptance of recycled water, and this should definitely be factored in educational efforts, as it is very possible that most of these negative perceptions are just fueled by unsafe reuse practices and can be countered by investing in and demonstrating acceptable reuse standards. Next, we looked at the economic, social, and technical feasibility of rolling out these grey and wastewater reuse systems. And for the economic feasibility, there are two things that you'll have to look at. And one is the price consideration for purchasing and maintaining the systems, and also the price considerations for water. So those who are who have been found to be in lower income levels are found to pay higher costs for water compared to those who are in higher and middle income areas, yet the latter is a segment of the population that is better able to afford these wastewater reuse systems. Technical experts also indicated that saving on water costs was not a leading driver for business, just based on a return on investment consideration. And formal users, those who use the commercial systems, attested that savings on water costs was one of the benefits that they received from having the systems, although this was not a motivation for them to install these systems. But just having sufficient demand of the systems would be able to reduce their costs through economies of scale, as well as through increased marketplace competition, and will allow these systems to become more widely adopted in the region. In terms of social feasibility, technical experts gave a very low score to knowledge of water reuse among members of the public, but were also very quick to acknowledge that over the past few years, they have seen a significant increase in the number of people who are adapting the practice and are seeking out their services. Again, public perception would still come in place here, and this greatly affects the rollout of these systems, as I'd mentioned before, and this should definitely be countered with educational efforts that are just directed at different target audiences, and overall all the stakeholders that would be part of the wastewater recycling industry. Lastly, we looked at the technical feasibility of the rollout of the systems, and these systems require both availability of land and secure tenancy for construction, which presents a hurdle for those who have neither. And while the systems are automated for day-to-day operations, they have also been found to be very maintenance intensive, which can make a lot of people just shy away from them. Participants reported that the water quality is good for their non-potable users, which is lawn watering, car washing, or cleaning their driveways, but that systems need appropriate maintenance, as I mentioned before. For Kibera participants who use the bucket method, this was just found to be very sufficient with no treatment prior to reuse. So basically, as I have discussed, the growing number of urban wastewater recycling systems globally indicates that water reuse is a viable strategy for sustainability efforts. And this practice has been found to be a water conservation and a sanitation solution for some in Nairobi. So financial incentives for homeowners can be a good means to overcome the barriers that we were able to identify. And additionally, educational efforts that are focused on technical systems and the safe reuse practices of this of the resulting reclaimed water, and that can be tailored to different audiences, is also an important strategy for increased uptake and rollout of these systems. And furthermore, there's a need for government to formulate proper wastewater reuse regulations that address water quality needs for all who are in the sector. And lastly, as much as we had a very small study, we were able to have a few policy recommendations for government, and that I'll just go through them very quickly. The first is improving governance by being able to bridge administrative and sectoral divide through stakeholder engagement, which is what is currently missing in the region right now, and also the development of domestic wastewater reuse policy. And secondly, is establishment of financial foundations through the implementation of economic incentives on water pricing and providing financial support for those who want to purchase the system. Thirdly is the provision of mechanisms for demand management strategies, which is currently lacking, as a major focus on water supply in Nairobi is on supply side strategies. Thank you.
Leslie. And so we're going to move to Eliza. And just while Eliza is setting up, the importance of capacity development, both within government structures themselves, through populations, the acceptability factor. And I think we have a question on that already that maybe both Leslie and Cecilia can address when we get to the questions. So there are a few of you who have asked if the slides will be available, and yes, they will be. And I think Scott will be giving you the website just before we close out for the day. So a few of you have asked that, and yes, the presentations will be available, as well as a recording actually of the presentations themselves. I think you're muted. Oh.
Can you see my screen?
No.
No, we can't.
No. Now we can.
Now, yes, yes. First of all, I want to thank Mary for the invitation. It is important to share knowledge to create efficient solutions for water resources management around the world. I will talk about water availability with water use systems and how studying the water availability is paramount to promote a transition to the circular economy in water resources management. Firstly, I will talk about how the introduction of water use systems impacts water resources management. Secondly, I will talk about water availability. And then I will show a case study in Brazil where I use this concept of water availability to illustrate how this is a key factor to transform water resources management in an integrated and holistic process. So, current water resources management, at least in Brazil, was designed to attend the human demand. Firstly, the water is withdrawn from river, and then it passes through water treatment plants, and next it's distributed among different users. After the use, the wastewater is treated, and it comes back to the river. So we have a linear process on water resources management. As we have seen at Leslie's presentation, at Mary and Cecilia, there is a diversity of possibilities of water pathways. For example, the treated household wastewater might be reused in factories and agriculture, or a factory might internally recycle its water. In this way, we could close the cycles and have a circular economy model. And with the impacts that come, come with this transition, we have the water availability increase. So how does that happen? As less water might be withdrawn from the rivers, more water might be available to water uses. And as less treated wastewater is discharged into rivers, higher water quality might be available to other users. So in order to make decisions that will bring benefits not only to environment, but also to factories, agriculture, and other uses, the water availability should be evaluated in a way that includes the quantity, the quality, and also the water purpose. I will try something here, but to illustrate how that would work, I developed a case study in Brazil to contextualize where this study happened. Here map is the International Water Resources Association, France, and the study was developed in South Brazil, where the Iguaçu waterfall are located, in which is the largest waterfall system in the world. The study was developed in same river, but near Curitiba, close to the river source, from where I am speaking with you right now. Curitiba has around 3 million inhabitants, and this study area is close to an industrial region, exactly in this point of the map. To understand the importance to develop the water use system in Brazil, I will bring a shorter overview. Brazil has the largest freshwater supply in the world, with 12% of the entire planet's total volume. Despite this, it faced a water crisis between 2012 and 2016, and that hit the São Paulo region hard. The crisis started because of the increased water demand, poor water quality of local rivers, and a shortage of rainfall, causing water stress. Brazil still having a lack of directives concerning water use and integrated water resources management. But São Paulo already has a water use system where they reuse household wastewater in the industrial pole. You can see the Aquapolo water reuse system in this picture on the right. They have the capacity to treat 1,000 liters per second. This amount of water could supply 500,000 people. In Iguaçu River, we have some issues. Right now, we are passing through a dry season. Today, there are people without water here in Curitiba due to rational measures. As you can see in this picture, the Iguaçu waterfall in normal days. This is another picture. It's also in normal days, but look at this bridge. So that is how it looks like right now. It's really dry. Another issue is that the Iguaçu River has poor water quality close to Curitiba, where the organic matter concentrations ranges from 25 to 65 milligrams per liter. So I analyzed the water withdrawal and the wastewater discharge in the Iguaçu River. There is already an indirect water use process in which concentrations of organic matter from released effluents upstream have not been fully assimilated until the next user. Another factor that should be also considered is the seasonal water availability in the river. We have some months with less rain. That means less water, and that decreases the dilution of organic matter and other pollutants. So we have a risk associated with water availability. So the question is how to attend the increase of water demand in this developing region. The solution for this question comes with the water availability analysis. The two study possibilities of water use from the wastewater treatment plant and from factories. Both allow reducing the load of organic matter into Iguaçu River. That is around 500 tons per liter. That allows the other downstream users to have a better water quality too. Water use and circular economy might be trend topics in water resources management, but we cannot forget that reducing should always be the first option. Looking for water losses in water distribution and factory process should be a priority. Water availability analysis is fundamental for transforming water resources management into an integrated and a circular economy model. There are several pathways that water may follow among users with water use systems. The determination of the best economic and environmental efficiency should be made based on the analysis of water availability that includes the quantity, quality, and purpose of water. So this research was made with the support of Institutes LecTech and Sanepar and the University Federal of Paraná. And here's my mail, so please feel free to send me email.
Excellent. Thank you, Eliza. So while you're thinking of your questions, I think we're going to launch a poll question for you about what step will advance water reuse the quickest. You've got a few options there. I don't think people can see my screen, right? Scott, you can just access that.
Yes, the poll is launched, and we have already 10% of people have responded. So. Okay,
great. All right, so for some reason, I've lost, oops. I've lost my view of my other panelists.
Nope, it's okay. It happens. It's natural. When the poll is going, it covers the cameras.
Okay, well, okay. So for some reason I can't see my panelists, so I'll have to rely on you to just give me a verbal indication about answering the question. So we have a few questions along the theme of water quality. You know, when we talk about water reuse and specifically wastewater reuse, as Leslie put it, there's a certain yuck factor. So there's questions about, you know, pathogens and viruses, the quality, and whether it's within standards or not, and emerging contaminants. So these are several questions, but I'm sort of grouping them so that, and just opening it up to the panel to provide some responses. And maybe Cecilia, we can start with you.
Cecilia, are you muted there, Cecilia?
Yes. Can you
your
hear me now?
webcam is off as well. So if you want to turn on your webcam, that would be great.
What I see only is the IWRA screen, which is the one of the poll.
Okay, well, not to worry. I mean, there's a little webcam button just as we on the top. So if you have a chance, you can tap it. And if you can't see it, then it's not a problem.
Okay, yes, because my camera is on. But
Okay.
what I was mentioning was that the contaminants are of concern. There we are all, and it's a concern, and there have been multiple studies. The first city that implemented direct potable reuse was Windhoek in Namibia, and that was in 1968. And US has implemented it in numerous cities, so much that it's becoming a trend. And then you have Singapore, you have indirect potable reuse in UK, and you also have it in Belgium. And in all the cases, the concern is that the water is safe, and that basically you are not bringing a public health issue, but it's not, because wastewater, the processes to treat wastewater are well established. To treat all viruses, we know, even the COVID-19. But what the national research, yes, all the national research groups in all the countries, what they identify is that one of the main challenges is the emerging contaminants, because you don't know what is coming. Now, in the case of Singapore, by law, PUV has to monitor a certain number of parameters daily, and PUV monitors about 3 times of that, because they are aware that there may be potential contaminants you have to be aware of. So is that a concern at present? And the answer is that all the water utilities are working for it. EPA has developed, together with numerous stakeholders, and stakeholders is something that you mentioned in your presentation, Mary, has developed together with all numerous stakeholders in US, what it is the EPA action plan. Because they recognize that water reuse is needed because of climate change, because of population growth, because of increasing number of uses, and because the amount of water you have is less. And in all the cases, the priority is always that water is safe. So all these concerns you mentioned are being addressed by every city where water reuse is being implemented and where it is also planned.
Okay. And Leslie, do you have anything to add about water quality and how that was addressed, or the policies that you would recommend?
So in terms of the water quality, as I mentioned before, those who were using the commercial systems reported they really voiced no concerns over the quality of their wastewater, or rather the wastewater that they were reusing, especially for the purposes that they were using it for. So I think for that, I'd say really we really need to just have like educational efforts. I feel would be the best thing that is needed, especially for Nairobi, so that people can be taught on how to reuse, how to fast recycle their wastewater, and which purposes they can be able to reuse this water for. Because I mean, we cannot use this water for drinking, we cannot use it for bathing or whatnot. But then I think once people would be able to just be taught on which specific purposes that they can be able to use this water for, then maybe it can be able to reduce that yuck factor that is there now. And in terms of policies, I'd say that Kenya really does not have a policy on domestic wastewater reuse, and that's also one of the things that that's really crippling. It's already crippling a very young industry, and I think if we did have a policy just that would be able, it would be like a very good guideline for those who are recycling their wastewater. They'd be able to have something to look into and to be able to know that, oh, this is how we are supposed to be able to, we're supposed to recycle our wastewater, and this is how we're supposed to reuse the reclaimed water that we have recycled. So I'd say that's what's really missing, at least for Kenya at the moment.
Thank you. And Eliza, do you want to add to that? Because certainly water availability was part of what you looked at, and that's related to water quality.
Yeah, in Brazil, we don't have yet directives, laws that support water use systems. I think that the first thing that we should be working in is laws and directives. In the same way, I'm afraid that we make the same mistake as lately. Here in Brazil, we have writing policies just focusing on drinkable water. So because of this approach, we still see factories and agriculture use drinkable water when this is not necessary. These economic laws and environmental laws. So we need to start to come up with directives that are more integrated and reach all stakeholders.
Okay. Yeah, so you know, there are clearly lots of issues related to quality, matching quality to use. I know certainly in where I am in Canada and a lot of parts of the world, we use high use water, potable water for all kinds of applications that absolutely don't require that quality. So it's in some ways an opposite problem, but it's related because we end up using higher volumes of water than we would need otherwise too, because treatment also requires water in a lot of cases. So we have a question about the domestic uses versus other uses, industry and agriculture, and the fact that agriculture is a large water user, and whether or not there are any policies at the governmental level related to, you know, allocation, you know, among sectors. I know nobody specifically addressed that, and we don't have a speaker talking about agriculture, but you know, maybe we can just speak more broadly to the use of water allocation to different sectors. I'll just open it up.
If I can comment on this, in most of the countries, the water is the primary objective of water supply, or water is mostly allocated for population, for domestic use. And then it is allocated the way that is necessary for economic reasons or for policy or for political reasons. And then so much water, it is said in the literature, and you go to different places, and it is always repeated that agriculture is the one that uses most of the water, and it is inefficient. But it's not always inefficient, because you need that amount of water to recharge the aquifers. But going back to allocation is very much a political decision. And normally is you have certain amount for domestic uses, then for the industrial uses, and the rest for the agriculture. Singapore has announced last year that is going to implement what they call the 30 by 30 goal. And this means that by 2030, Singapore is going to produce in Singapore 30% of the nutritional value that the population requires. That is going to be a very big increase compared to what it is now, because now Singapore produces about 10% of the water, of food that it needs, the rest of imported. And this has many implications also in terms of water allocation, because so far you have been producing and allocating and taking care of the quality of water and discharges of two sectors, which are the industrial sector and the domestic sector. And you're introducing at a larger scale a new sector. So of course, Singapore is going to take care of this, and it will be at a different level because it's going to be indoors agriculture. But then again, if we go to the normal agriculture, to the irrigation agriculture, then again, allocation is based on policy decisions, on political decisions. How is this related to water reuse, which is our topic, right, or our circular economy? We reuse water, which is we use it more than once in many ways. And in the case of agriculture, for example, large users in the world of water reuse, raw water reuse, are India and Mexico. And this comes with numerous health problems. Are there places where water for agriculture is treated? Yes, there are some places. There are places where water for agriculture is treated by law at a higher quality, because you are affecting not only your produce, but you are affecting the aquifers. And we have examples in the whole world where you have the dead zones out of pollution from fertilizers, pesticides. Now, would this change if your allocation of water was different? No, because you still need a strong, a robust agricultural sector. And that's why you need water. What would be better for the world is that water is not your water. It is more efficient systems from the agricultural one to the water related one.
Yeah, I think I know Eliza also mentioned water efficiency and reducing use as a first step. Is anyone else, Leslie or Eliza? Okay. How is our poll going? Scott, I can't see the results.
Yeah, well, we had the results just closed up the poll a few minutes ago, and with almost over half, I believe, of our respondents stated that the reform of laws and regulations would be the quickest way to drive the adoption of more water reuse and circular economy. So quite a heavy lean on that specific area, laws and reuse. But I do know that several of you mentioned and wrote to me saying that you were unable to click the poll question. I'm sorry, it's a technical issue. I'll bring it up with our webinar provider.
Okay. And what's leading? What is the leading choice?
The reform of laws and regulations.
Okay, great. So we have a question about how can you prevent people that use recovered wastewater for potable use, even if it's not fit for that purpose? So this idea, you know, maybe we can broaden that again to the importance of capacity and understanding, public outreach. Is there a potential health hazard by having different qualities of water that are intended for different uses available, you know, with maybe a public that isn't fully appreciative of the different water quality coming out of various, you know, various processes. You know, Leslie, if you want to do
that. Okay, sure. So I'd start with just like an example in Kenya. This was not really part of my research, but we have seen a lot in the news that very many people, even in Kibera, which was part of my study, you'll find a lot of people who they're using sewage water for irrigation, and this is definitely, you know, a public health risk. So just for them to be able to counter this, I think I'd say again that the biggest thing that is needed is still, you know, just trying to educate these people. But then even if you educate them and they still feel like, you know, this is like a business aspect for them. So they still feel like we still need to, you know, water these plants with some form of water and be able to sell these vegetables to people. But if they don't have access to potable water in the first place, then yes, they are going to use sewage water to be able to irrigate the crops that they are going to eventually sell out to people. So I'd start maybe first they need to have access to water and sanitation. And as I mentioned before, again, Kibera experiences very great challenges when it comes to potable water and sanitation. And also they have been found to pay way higher prices just for them to be able to get potable water as compared to other places in Nairobi. So there are very many underlying issues that would make people to use water that is not really for that purpose, to use it for purposes such as irrigation and mostly irrigation of their crops. So in terms of that, I think definitely as much as you can have these laws and regulation, I think you also need to be able to solve the underlying issues that they have of just getting access to potable water, and also just improving their sanitation, because a lot of, again, in Kibera, a lot of them dump their liquid and solid waste in open ditches, which is already a health hazard in itself. So it has a lot of underlying issues, and you cannot be able to just solve one thing and feel like you have solved everything. I think you'll have to look at very different aspects of why this is happening and how you should be able to counter this from continuing to go on.
Right. And any of the other panelists want to address that?
Yes, the element of education is very important, but like Leslie says, if that is the water that is available, that is the water that is going to be used. And we know that wastewater has organics, so people don't have to use, they don't have to spend, for example, in fertilizer, right? Which is the preferred reason to use the water is available, and you don't have to spend more. And basically you need a livelihood. So it is bigger than that. Education is important, of course, at every level, but it's only one part of a much bigger problem. And but of course, even if you don't solve the bigger problem, this one should be targeted, because the people themselves get trapped in this vicious cycle of human, of quality of life. The more you use the raw water, the more health problems you are going to have and are going to create. And in the case of water reuse as recycled wastewater, which is what we have in several cities in the world, that is for potable use, directly and indirectly. Education has been a very important element, because people are reluctant to drink it, because they don't know if the wastewater, what is the process that water goes through, so instead of being wastewater, it becomes drinking water. And the water utilities and the governments all over the world have recognized that much better communication is important. But the fact that the public has been involved has also meant that projects have been improved, because education is not only about information, and that has been the mistake of many governments. I inform you, you accept. No, you provide information and you engage the population, and then if you have to improve your project and that costs you more, then you improve it and that costs you more. But your project will have the benefit, the social benefit and the economic benefit you were looking for. So when we talk about education, it's not only about the water users. It's also about governments at different levels, and also about NGOs. It's a very important element if we want to make progress in terms of quality of life. Because when we talk about water, we should always remember this is about development. It's never about water. If we reuse water, it's because we need it for socioeconomic purposes. And then we treat it at different qualities, as you mentioned, for different uses. But all this is because of livelihood. So this is where our focus should be. Water is only one element, and within that one is also education, and it's also technology and the regulations that are so important. But we should never forget that this is about development. I mean, how do you insert all these elements so do you achieve the development?
Right. And Eliza, do you have anything to add on this topic of capacity or matching, appropriate matching quality to use and not endangering, health?
I totally agree with you. I think we have the same opinion that we need laws and directives and education. I think this is really important, and we need to. I just came example now for me that São Paulo that I bring, they already have wastewater treatment. They reuse the water. So the only reason that they start to have that come allow that said in this region to say that factories should not more use drinkable water, and I know education is important, but sometimes I think here laws and directives make changes. It's hard to decide what is important, and it's okay.
Like setting priorities.
Yes.
Yeah.
What Elisa mentioned is very important. During the 2012 to 2016 drought in Sao Paulo, that there were so many problems, and education and awareness played such an important part. Sabespi, the water utility of this very large metropolitan area, took very many appropriate measures. And some of them are like Elisa mentioned. There were changes in the industries, in the companies, because they worked with them. And changes at the industry level, at the company level, that means that they are not going to be reversed, because these are changes in terms of technology. And many companies achieve lower water consumption. So that is going to stay. People learn that they had to use less, not because they were in the drought for a long area, but also Sabespi used many communication and education strategies that stay with the people. And these are millions of people, right? But in terms of companies, changes are also permanent. So if we talk about this circular economy, these extreme events like the droughts, if used properly, like Singapore says, never let a crisis go without learning from it, then again, in terms of the circular economy, you are going to make progress in terms of conservation, of reuse, of awareness. And given the amount and the intensity of the extreme events the world is living, each one of these steps is very important. And given the globalization, even now with COVID-19, even the globalization that exists in the world, we learn from each other in every place. So out of the experiences of Sao Paulo, of the droughts, the repeated droughts, out of the several droughts in California, the droughts in Bentucky, Namibia, we all as part of the population of society, and then our different sectors are learning. And I think we are incorporating, we are starting to use, even without using the word of the circular economy, we are becoming more efficient in the use and the reuse of resources, not only water. And that is very important, again, because that is bringing a change.
Right. Okay. So we have a question about finance in water security. How can impact investors support the change needed? And this questioner has the impression that water resource management is a highly politicized matter, and the struggle to identify the best inroad is for sustainable finance. Does anybody want to comment?
I think you cannot have sustainable finance without without efficient institutions, without long-term planning. So it's not only the finance, it's the finance within the context. As you said from the beginning, we have to find it a context. Most of the time, we as society and as governments blame lack of finances, which is true. However, for finances to be useful in the long term, they have to be within frameworks of governance. So that is where you start. You start with your institutions, formal and informal, and you start with your laws and your regulations. And then the finance is going to provide all the benefit that it has. In the case of Singapore, you always hear about investments in the order of millions of dollars. And you see all the benefit they bring. It is because they are planned for, so your finance is never wasted, but it is always used. At every step, in whatever you can think, but in the water sector, for infrastructure development, for capacity building, for research and development, you need finance, but you need to have planned how to use it. Otherwise, we know of numerous cities in the world where finance has been wasted, be this by donors or by governments that come from taxpayers. It's not finance. It is finance within a context of governance and proper institutions. And I'm sure Leslie, I'm from Mexico, so Leslie, at least I'm sure we know what we're talking about. It's not only about money. It's the way the money is used and the accountability that comes with it.
Want to comment, Leslie, or?
I definitely agree with Cecilia on that, because you can't just throw money at something and miraculously expect it to solve everything. And I think when it comes to issues of water resource management, I don't think also you can just take like a linear approach, because there are various issues that are affecting water resource management, and I think this is something that should be approached from different ways, so you can start approaching it at a grassroots level, being able to talk to people on the ground, having just trying to understand, what they need and what the best way forward would be, and also government officials also, at the top level, being able to also have like this policies and laws that we talked about. And so I think when you are able to approach these issues in all from all these various angles, and be able to put all these ideas into water resource management and not just throw money at it, I think that would be a better way to be able to get advancements when it comes to water resource management, and specifically when it comes to also water reuse, as we are talking about.
Okay. So I think we have time for a couple of more questions. So there are some questions specifically for individual presenters, and we have quite a few questions. And I think that we will have the opportunity to email, if your question isn't answered, you will have the opportunity to have it answered, maybe just in one-on-one communication with the panelists, because we are coming to the end of our time. But we have a question about just costs being distributed. So still on this theme, who pays for the treatment or the wastewater treatment, and how are the new users of wastewater charged? So, it's really, I guess, a question of equity more broadly. Is this approach based on polluter pays, or in the case that Eliza outlined, the river quality is already compromised, so nobody has paid for that. So who pays for wastewater treatment or the intake water treatment in that case? So does anybody want to lead off with that? Maybe Eliza?
It's a really hard question, because I have the feeling that we don't know how much the value of water. We start to understand in the worst scenario with drought, with climate changes. So it's hard to say now looking now, who needs to pay? The treatment is responsibility of whom? It's a kind of a challenge. I think we need to really develop solutions together, and this with education policies, as we had already said, bring this perception that water resources is in a scarce condition. So we need to. I really don't. It's hard. It's a challenge.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
On the other hand, in the developing world, almost no city treats the wastewater, and we have to pay in many cities a certain tax. In the utility bills, there comes, at least for example in Mexico, there comes a certain amount you have to pay for wastewater treatment, and the water is not treated. So it's paying, but it's basically also the service. Is it enough for the service? And that is the eternal discussion by the utilities that said our water pricing that includes water and wastewater is not enough. And the argument from society is the services you have been providing for such a long time is so bad, why should society pay more? So I don't necessarily think that it's about equity. It's about, not always, at least not in terms of wastewater treatment. We don't treat it in the developing world. We pay a certain amount. The question again is, if we pay more, is water going to be treated and the pollution won't be as extensive as it is?
Yeah. I mean, the issue isn't a new one with circular economy. It just really comes to the forefront because certainly, you know, when a discharger gets a permit to release an effluent, they are taking a certain capacity from the environment to assimilate those pollutants. And in some cases, the pollutants can't be assimilated at all because they're, you know, some of these emerging contaminants that have, you know, hormonal effects and those kinds of things, they're not assimilated in the environment. So as we see more and more pressure on our water resources, I think as societally, we begin to appreciate the value of water, which has not been part of the price for water. For, you know, taking water, even treating water is typically, you know, the chemicals and the energy. It's not related to the value of the resource itself, and it's not taking that sort of more holistic approach to valuation. It's just a very, very narrow question of valuation. So you know, it is a challenge in terms of not only, you know, how do we pay going forward, but the legacy of past uses that we have in our environment right now. You know, there really is no equitable solution when you look at it really in that way for future generations. We just have to start doing better now in terms of releasing pollutants and limiting water use, and work to improve the receiving environment as we use water resources. We cannot continue to degrade the water environment for economic activities that aren't also incorporating the cost of cleaning up after that activity. We simply can't bring that practice into the future. And it's easy to say, it's very, very difficult to implement, but it's I think starts with a mind change that no, you know, the environment isn't out there for us to deposit things to. It is out there for us to treat as a valuable resource in multiple ways that we rely upon. So we only have a few minutes, and I know we have a few housekeeping things. So maybe I'll turn it over to Scott, and maybe we can get the last poll numbers too. And I think we only have about 4 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. So the poll we have with the question was, what steps will one single step will advance water reuse the quickest? 11% said that additional research and funding, 25% said expanded public education, 16% said grassroots support, and 48%, so nearly half, reform of laws and regulations. So
Yeah.
people want to see new laws.
Yeah, and it reflects the complexity of the issue, right? Where it's a combination of top down and grassroots up, and a whole change in approach at multiple levels. It's global to local, so not an easy subject, you know. And we've had an hour and a half, so we're not going to solve the issues here. But I think that the case studies and the publication that is coming out, I hope it will be inspirational in terms of what can be achieved, and highlighting some of the things that we continue to need to address.
Well, I agree. Was there any final thoughts you have, or should we wrap up?
I think we should probably wrap up unless the panelists want to take 30 seconds each.
I think we come with these new concepts like the circular economy, and it's fine because we focus, we put in words what should have been done and what already exists, but it should be brought forward, right? And not, as you mentioned from the beginning, perhaps there is not one definition on water security, not one on the circular economy, but it's a broad concept that requires implementation and is going to vary depending on the context, and that is how we should take it.
Thank you. Eliza?
I think that we did a really big progress today, and I think this kind of things like International Water Resources Association are doing. This is also education and bring to people space to talk about and share knowledge. So I think this is what a little step of a lot of steps that we have to achieve a circular economy and a world that think in a water resources management in an integrated way that considers water use systems and other possibilities of save water. And yeah, I think this is my final words.
Thank you. And Leslie?
I'd say that I think it's a lot of times, you know, developing countries have been said to be, you know, lagging behind when it comes to technology or a lot of other things. But I'd say it's a really good thing that, you know, in a place like Kenya, we were able to find out that a lot of people have started, you know, reusing their water. And I think as much as the concept of a circular economy might be a bit strange to people, you know, who are not in the water industry, I think it can just be simplified in a way that, you know, what goes, you know, from the earth goes back into the earth. And I think if we have this mindset, and not just on water alone, on all the other resources that, you know, we are using, if we have a mindset of, you know, we want to use as little bit of it and as efficiently as possible so that, you know, we can be able to conserve these resources that are not, you know, they're not as abundant as we think they are, you know. So I think it's a great thing that we do find that people are reusing water, even if it's in very small capacities and it's very hard to quantify it. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Scott?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I would personally like to thank everyone on the panel, and special thanks to Mary Trudeau for this great job moderating. I thought that you did a really great job. Thanks. So everyone, thank you for presenting. Mary Trudeau at Environs Incorporated, Leslie Roach from the University of Waterloo, Lisa Stefan from Fractal Herring Simmons, and Cecilia Sotiga from the National University of Singapore. Thank you all for your contributions today. I know for the audience, I know that some of the panel and IWRA are on Twitter, so go ahead and look us up and give us a follow if that's Twitter is the type of social media you like. And if any of the presentations left you interested in learning more, please go to our LinkedIn webpage where you can continue the discussion there. I know we've had several questions from the audience about if the panelist presentations or recordings of the webinar will be online. Of course, they will be. Go to our website, www.iwra.org. You can go, you'll see there's a webinar panel there, and you can go and we'll have pretty soon, give us a day or two, and we'll have those all posted up. And you can also see recordings of all our past webinars as well. So if you want to learn more and dig back into the past, go ahead. But I hope that everyone here found the insights provided by our panel during this special event to be really helpful, and it'll give you some material to work with and to think about and to use in your either your work or your studies in the coming weeks, and hope generates a lot of creativity, new ideas for how you're going to engage with your work. So just to remind you, everyone, that the webinar was brought to you by the International Water Resources Association. We're an almost 50-year-old nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization. We focus on bridging disciplines and geographies, connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions, everyone who's concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. So if you're interested in learning more about the association or you want to become a member, please go to www.iwra.org. So on behalf of the whole IWRA office, thank you so much all for your contributions and for watching today.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.